And a good Tuesday morning to you, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. I had a great time hanging out with folks over at ESOG yesterday. Really fun stuff, and we're going to have fun stuff on today's program as well. Con and Raleigh going to stop by, part of a Kroger Fresh Take. We'll talk about everything happening around UGA, and there is some very interesting stuff on the horizon. We will do all of that. Also, more of these opinions trickling in about what you expect from Georgia this upcoming season. We will talk about all of that. And, boy, a very provocative story at ESPN.com about how the transfer portal is pretty much working out exactly the way we thought it would. We'll tell you about all of that over the course of our time together and get ready for the Diamond Dogs in the SEC baseball tournament tonight. It is on the way. DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I want to begin today's show by taking you back to yesterday's show just briefly. One of the things you may remember that I talked to the great former Georgia All-American John Stinchcomb about was the fact that Georgia, on paper for the upcoming season, once you get past that Clemson game week one, and no one's going to dispute what a grizzly bear, a behemoth that is, we all understand that, but you got to play somebody, so you play this really tough team week one, and then after that, it certainly seems like on paper, the Georgia schedule opens up for Georgia in a way that in some years it kind of hasn't. I like the way that John said this yesterday, and you can go back and listen to the full show yesterday to kind of get all of this from John. He said, you almost get the sense this is the way that other college football teams in other conferences must feel from time to time when you look at these games and say, wow, my team ought to be able to win those games. Sometimes in the SEC, you're not quite left feeling that way sometimes with your team. But for Georgia this year, there's a chance that might be true. Let me back up with some numbers here for a moment. If you use preseason FPI as kind of a guiding point on this comes from ESPN, their Football Power Index. And to be honest with you, that is a potentially problematic analytic data set, depending on your perspective on this. But just to use this for the sake of conversation right now, Georgia only plays one team in the regular season in the preseason FPI top 10. That's obviously Clemson. They play just two in the top 13. By then, you've kind of added Florida into the mix. They play 3 of the top 15 and just 4 of the top 28 teams in the country in the preseason, according to the ESPN FPI. So from that standpoint, yeah, kind of a manageable schedule. You want something to kind of compare that to? Arkansas, as a for instance, plays 4 of the top 10 and 5 of the top 11 in the preseason FPI in their upcoming regular season. So if you want kind of just sort of a numeric basis for why the Georgia schedule looks pretty manageable this upcoming year, just use preseason FPI as your guide. Much easier on paper than what, say, a team like Arkansas is expected to play for the upcoming season. But the other thing we said on yesterday's show is, as a fan, every now and then I find myself wanting to get a little bit greedy. Every now and then I kind of want more than just a win for my team. I want to really kind of flex or spike the football or whatever else. And if you got a chance to listen to yesterday's show, one of the things you may have heard me say on yesterday's show was I played that audio from Paul Feinbaum, who went on the Birmingham, Alabama radio station, WJOX, and he was talking about what the narrative was going to be for Brian Harsin, the first-year coach at Auburn, and how this was all about proving that you could recruit, with the big boys, the Alabamas, the Georgias, and it wasn't so much about what your record was in year one. It was more about kind of establishing yourself as a potential destination for recruits. And I said on yesterday's show that, boy, there's a way of listening to this that sort of makes it sound like Auburn may be kind of gearing itself up for a moral victory. And, quick aside here, I don't know that any program in the SEC does moral victory more often, and sort of rallies around the idea of a moral victory more frequently than Auburn does. And it sort of sounds like, well, they may be trying to get ready for a moral victory here to say, hey, we may have played Georgia close this year, but once Brian Harsin gets his recruits in there, we're going to start winning these games. We're going to start beating teams like Georgia there in the future. So what I said on yesterday's show is, okay, if they're trying to get the moral victory thing going, if they're trying to kind of rally around the idea of, oh, we played Georgia close this year, but next year you watch out what happens then as a Georgia fan, I want to be a little bit greedy and say, for my team in this game, I want to do more than just win this game. I'd like to win this game decisively. I'd like to win this game going away. I'd like to see Georgia pound Auburn the way that it has so many times in recent years. That way, the notion of Auburn kept it close with Georgia, Brian Harsin's eventually going to be a good coach, that narrative doesn't get any legs at all. We talked about that on yesterday's show. So if you're with me thus far, here's kind of some of the stuff we talked about yesterday. On paper, it appears that Georgia has a pretty manageable schedule. Harsin, one of 4 first-year coaches they'll play in this upcoming year. And Georgia already expected to be a pretty big favorite over Auburn. Remember we did the FanDuel Sportsbook point spreads the other day. Georgia a double-digit favorite at the time against Auburn. They're still a 10-point favorite. If you go to the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now, you can see Georgia's a 10-point favorite against Auburn. And what I said on yesterday's show is, wow, part of me wants to get a little greedy here. I don't want Brian Harsin to have any first-year success at all. How about a demoralizing victory for Georgia against Auburn in a way that kind of keeps any kind of like first-year momentum, happy talk going on with the Brian Harsin situation there at Auburn. Do you remember all that from yesterday? So now, with all of that said, I guess from a certain standpoint, that game may actually, in the eyes of some people, and I'm talking about Georgia-Auburn now when I say this, that game in the eyes of some people may actually be a little more difficult on paper than it may have initially appeared to us. I'm not really quite sure what you do with this, but I do think it's my job to bring you the information that's out there. We said the other day that FanDuel had Georgia as a 10-point favorite against Auburn. It was one of their games of the year for the upcoming season. Well, this last couple of days, we've also seen the South Point Sportsbook, which is in Nevada. That's the sports book in Las Vegas that kind of thinks of itself as the college football sports book. There's always been a little bit of an arms race to see who could get games of the year lines out first. For a long time, the Golden Nugget was probably the one that did that, probably the first and the best. And in recent years, the South Point has tried to kind of get out in front of all of that, be the absolute first to get its college football games of the year out. I'll show you on the screen what the scorecard looks like here. I realize you can't see that, but I will give you some of these. And I think most interesting in my mind is what the South Point says about Georgia and Auburn. They only have Georgia right now as a 4-point favorite against Auburn when Georgia goes to Jordan-Hare Stadium later on this fall in the month of October. Now, you may be thinking this, well, BA, that sounds like a pretty good middle. For those of you that kind of understand how this works, you could bet Georgia's a 4-point favorite at the FanDuel, bet Auburn as a 10-point underdog at the South Point, and if Georgia wins by 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, you win both bets. And theoretically, the other bets kind of cancel each other out, so therefore, you really can't lose except for the vigorous, and you obviously have a chance to win both bets, including the key number of 7. But before you get too excited about that, you actually have to be in Nevada to place this bet or in one of the FanDuel states to place that bet. So unless you have travel already set up there, that might not work out too well for you. So push that aside here for the moment. The point is, how about this gigantic difference in opinion? Double-digit favorite at one sports book is Georgia against Auburn. Less than a touchdown favorite, just above a field goal favorite, is Georgia here when it comes to the South Point. Now, which of these sports books is more right than the other? I guess, obviously, we would lean more in the direction of this being an easy win for Georgia against Auburn. But obviously we're going to trust the folks who build these big casinos out there, these big sports books, that maybe they have some idea of what they're talking about. And really, across the board here, when it comes to what the South Point put out, the news is somewhat similar in all of this. FanDuel had Georgia as an 8-point favorite against Florida. That's a pretty big number. South Point just has Georgia as a 6-point favorite in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. South Point also kind of favors Clemson more against Georgia than FanDuel did there as well. They've got Clemson as a 3.5-point favorite in that game. If you care about the clean old-fashioned hate at the end of the season, Georgia is a 21-point favorite against Georgia Tech, but that's really probably not all that unsurprising. The point here, though, is this. As we kind of bring in all this kind of preseason opinion, some of this more informed than others, and I've told you before, when it comes to preseason expectations, preseason opinions, things like that, I'm always going to trust those who are kind of in the betting community more so than just blowhards who speak into a microphone or sports writers who type into a keyboard, because when people like us get it wrong, there's really very little penalty for getting a prediction wrong. But when a sportsbook guy gets a prediction wrong, obviously that's money leaving that business account into the hands of bettors. The bettors, the betting community, the sportsbook type guys, they have to be a little bit more careful about some of the odds they establish. And what they're telling you right now is watch out out for Auburn. Maybe a little bit better there than some Georgia fans might think. I mentioned the ESPN FBI stuff a moment ago there as well. I guess there's a degree to which they kind of agree with that too. They do have Auburn 15th in their preseason football power index rating there as well. So I'm guessing most of this kind of falls on deaf ears a little bit with Georgia fans. The fact is, Georgia has handled Auburn easily in most games over the last decade plus, the one exception being the trip to Jordan-Hare Stadium back in November 2017. But other than that, it's been all Georgia since Kirby Smart has been head coach, and really even before that there as well. It has been a dominant time for Georgia in this Auburn rivalry, but maybe a little bit of a warning there from the betting folks to be a little bit careful with that road game at Auburn a little bit later on this year. We will stay tuned to find out how many Georgia fans take that claim seriously. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, or on the radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960, The Ref, and as a podcast, wherever you find them. Anywhere the podcast can be found, the Apple Player, the Google Player, Spotify, world-famous DawgNation.com. Many of you listen right there on SoundCloud there as well, whichever podcast platform you prefer. We just really appreciate you being a part of the program here today, and a big, big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making it all possible. I told you this, or at least I told our video audience off the top of the show today. I had a chance to hang out with the folks from Engineered Solutions of Georgia yesterday, and what a great time that was. Jay and Derek and the whole team over there doing a great job, really, really stepping up to the plate to help folks when it comes to your foundation, your waterproofing issues. And as a homeowner, this is one of those things that obviously can give you some angst. If you see some rain. Now, we hadn't had rain in a few days, but we will have some again. And when you see that rain creeping into your basement, your crawl space, your garage, when you see those cracks kind of show up in your foundation, and for those of you watching a video, where you see right there, that's where I was yesterday. The big fleet of ESOG vehicles, the entire staff. It was great to be able to do that yesterday and hear about all the ways in which Engineered Solutions of Georgia is helping so many of the folks in our audience with their foundation waterproofing needs. Of course, their number cannot be easy to remember. It's simply 678-ESOG now. Just dial that number, 678-ESOG now, and you can get in touch with them. They got 2 full-time engineers on staff. They will take really good care of you. In fact, I talked to Jay Easton yesterday, one of the founding partners of Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and he's obviously been so excited about all the DawgNation folks who've kind of reached out to him. They're proud partners of UGA there as well, so they're no stranger to helping UGA fans. In fact, Jay wanted me to share this special message with you about how appreciative he is of all that y'all have kind of been able to do with him and all the folks in our audience that he's been able to help. So this is Jay from Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Take a look and a listen to this. I'm here with Jay Easton, one of the founding partners of Engineered Solutions of Georgia. You know, Jay, on behalf of DawgNation, we've been so proud of our partnership with ESOG because I'm so thankful to know that when I tell folks to trust you for their foundation, waterproofing issues, I know you're taking really good care of them. So thank you so much for doing so much great work for our audience and being such a great partner for us here at DawgNation.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Dog fans. It's been an honor to be a part of DawgNation family, and we really appreciate everything that you guys do for us.
So great stuff there for Jay Easton from Engineered Solutions of Georgia. A lot of fun there. Speaking of fun, we're going to have more fun coming up in a moment. Connor Riley is part of a Kroger Fresh Take here. We're going to get everything going on around UGA with Connor here in just a little bit. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse here for a moment. And speaking of those preseason prognostications when it comes to Georgia, I gave you some point spread stuff off the top of the program a moment ago. How about some season win total stuff? You'd probably expect to see Georgia near the top of the country when it comes to that. And according to the DraftKings Sportsbook, that is indeed where Georgia is. Our buddy Brad Powers, gambling expert on Twitter, shared some of this. So Georgia among the highest expected season win totals in the country. And the way this works, for those of you who are unacquainted with this, you can simply bet a over-under here. Will you expect Georgia or any team you want to mention here to win more than this or less than this for the upcoming season? Georgia at 10.5. Just 5 teams have higher odds than that. Oklahoma is at 11. Ohio State is as well. Both Clemson and Alabama are at 11.5. So Georgia, one of the 6 teams in the country with the best odds for total number of victories for the upcoming season. If you're also interested in some of the other stuff when it comes to FanDuel on this, including some of the teams that Georgia plays, you got Missouri out of the SEC East. They are at a 7 right now in terms of their expected win total. Tennessee's just at a 6 right now. Kentucky at a 6.5. How about Vanderbilt's expected win total just 3, according to DraftKings right now? South Carolina's not much better. They're only at 4. You got Florida with a over-under win total of 9 right now. And if you're interested in the SEC West, there's a couple interesting things there. A&M, who obviously kind of touted as a potential threat to Alabama in the SEC West, maybe a little skepticism of them from the betting community here. DraftKings has them right now with a season win total of just 9.5. LSU is at 8.5. Mississippi State's just 5.5 right now. There's a little bit of talk about a year 2 bounce from Mike Leach. They were one of the teams that was top 10 preseason FPI, but just 5.5 for a season win total there at DraftKings. Arkansas is at 5.5. Auburn, who we talked about for a couple of minutes a moment ago, they are at 7 on this. And if you're interested, I thought this was kind of interesting. One of the teams that Georgia plays out of conference this year is UAB. Their season win total, according to DraftKings, 7.5. So a winning record from potential team out of the group of 5 there early on the slate for Georgia the week after the Georgia-Clemson game. So maybe keep your eye a little bit on those UAB Blazers there in week 2. So pretty interesting stuff. I'll put a link to all of this when we post the show later on at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Georgia expected to be one of the top teams in the country, at least on the basis of this metric when it comes to season win total 10.5. Only 5 teams in the country have better, expectations of that in terms of wins for the upcoming season. So at least on the basis of the betting metrics, Georgia right there in the thick of everything going on with the national championship hunt here this year. That is Around the Doghouse. We have got Connor Riley coming up here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And we'll talk to Connor about all of these preseason predictions, what that means for UGA, and, of course, everything else as well, including some great stuff that he's written at the website DawgNation.com as of late. So let's do all of that right now. He's welcome in Connor for a Kroger Fresh Take here on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And as promised, we will say hello to Connor Riley here on the program today. Connor said some great stuff at DawgNation.com, looking at what I think is a little bit of a theme here in terms of the depth that Georgia brings to the table for the upcoming season, both in terms of guys that you would kind of technically think of as backups who are really kind of emerging as some of the most well-known players in the Georgia roster. We'll talk to him about that and how many of those freshmen signees from the class of 2021 can be expected to really contribute in a big way this year. We'll do a lot of that with Connor here coming up in just a moment as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take. But before that, though, Connor, let's talk about some of the gambling stuff that is out there for Georgia, because I do think that's kind of a little bit of a window in the opinion that exists about Georgia right now. Over under, at least according to DraftKings, of 10.5. Pretty decent size favor in most of the games they'll play this upcoming year, at least once you get past Clemson in week 1. What is your takeaway on all of this for Georgia, at least up to this point?
I really like the over on wins for Georgia at 10.5. Essentially, if you think there's a good chance Georgia can win that Clemson game, which, again, 3.5 point spread, I think, from the number you pulled there. If you think they win that game, you're telling me they'd have to lose 2 more games after that. I really like that number there. Conversely, I really like the under on Clemson at 11.5, just because the expectation there is that they're going to win all their games. And if you have a tough game like Georgia to open the season, they lose that game, you win that bet week 1.
Yeah, Chip Patterson from CBS Sports was with me on SEC Country Live last Wednesday, and he said something on that show that has kind of stuck with me since then, that when Alabama and Florida State played to open the season a few years ago with the high ranking, I think it was 1 versus 3 at the time, I know that's a quarterback entry for Florida State, but when DeAndre Francois goes down, Florida State essentially fell apart after that, was never the same against then. And he kind of hinted, well, could something like that happen for one of these two teams? Obviously, you can't predict injuries, nor would we, hope that something like that were to happen or anything along those lines. But the notion of if Clemson were to lose to Georgia, somehow it creates a little bit of a downward spiral for the season. After Chip said that, I have to admit I have kind of thought about that as a possibility since then of, maybe it's not just so easy to kind of rubber stamp 11-1 for the team who loses this game, even though that's what a lot of the media is going to try to do.
I don't know if I'd go that far. That Florida State team had a lot of deeper problems that we probably didn't see at the surface of the time that Alabama-Florida State game. And I'd point out, since that game, Florida State hasn't been the same program, hasn't been able to get back to that number 3 overall ranking. Whereas I think if you're a Georgia team, UAB might be a tricky week 2 game. But at the end of the day, this Georgia team has enough talent, barring, I think, a JT Daniels injury, and knock on wood that doesn't happen here, to overcome that loss in the first game. Now, the tone and tenor of this season is going to be very, very different if Georgia loses that first game than wins it. But ultimately, I don't think this Georgia program is in the same footing as that Florida State one was back in 2016 when the game was played.
And just to be clear, I would never expect something like that to happen to Georgia. I guess all I'm saying is this notion that it's an easy rubber stamp for 11-1 for the team that loses that game. I don't know that's quite so true.
So who's the team then that you think trips up Georgia?
No, I'm not saying this on the Georgia side. I'm saying this more on
the Clemson side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the reason why I said that is because you said that you would take the under on the Clemson at 11.5, which I think is certainly a fair argument to make there. Interesting to see that in the case of South Point, the Auburn game much closer on paper there than one of the other sports books had it. If you're looking for games for Georgia that could be a little closer, Auburn, because it is a road game, obviously would kind of come to mind there. Georgia's lost there in the Kirby Smart era, so you'd at least have to consider it. But man, year one for an Auburn team that doesn't have much in the way of wide receiver play right now. Obviously, probably looking at the transfer portal to bring in a receiver before the summer's done. You might have to think. I just don't know how Auburn fields a competitive enough team to keep that game too close with Georgia right now.
Yeah, no. Before Texas A&M became your favorite team, Auburn was always a team and always a game that you were a little more concerned with than I would say the average Georgia fan. And I would point out, I think it was FanDuel that had them as 10-point favorites. Last time Georgia won by more than 10 points at Jordan-Hare Stadium, 2012. So Georgia does not have a great history of winning big down there on the plains. And again, I think part of the reason you've seen such these wide swings on Auburn is, more than any team I think in the SEC West, I have no idea what to expect from Auburn this year. I mean, you could tell me that they go the Texas A&M route, lean heavily on Tank Bigsby, and that's enough to get them to 8, 9, maybe even 10 wins if things break the right way. You could tell me that their offense can't overcome the losses that they've had at wide receiver, and Bo Nix continues to struggle at the quarterback position there. And you're looking at a 5-6 win season there, and that would be disastrous for Brian Harsin. So I think that's reflected in the lines where you've got one sports book saying Georgia should beat them by double digits, and the other one saying it should be a pretty close white-knuckle game there on October 9th. I mean,
unless the transfer portal changes things mightily between now and the start of the season, Auburn is one of those teams that I do expect, and we'll talk more about the addition of TJ Finley later on, but Auburn is one of those teams that I do expect to try to build an identity around Tank Bigsby. I think the spring game, sometimes spring games are not particularly revealing about any team. In the case of Auburn, we did see Bigsby, kind of factor into that, game plan pretty heavily that day, just given the fact that right now Bo Nix is probably a pretty significant disappointment for most Auburn fans, and he doesn't have a lot of weapons to throw to. Mike Bobo at this stage of his career has become, I would say, a pretty conservative-minded offensive coordinator. We may see a little bit of a throwback to almost like the Pat Dye era for Auburn this year, where, I do think, just on the basis of just the necessity, I think they might be more content to lean on Bigsby this year than maybe most teams in the SEC are looking to do with their running game.
Right, and you can point to in recent seasons teams having success doing that. Texas A&M did it a year ago, Georgia the year before that. But I would point out that Texas A&M and Georgia had much better offensive lines than what I think Auburn is going to have this season. And so if you want to bet it all on Tank Bigsby, that's good. But I think you can look back to even that 2017 Auburn team where they bet it all on Kerryon Johnson, and he got them very far and then got injured in that Alabama game, and Auburn really fell apart after that. And so if you're betting it all on Tank Bigsby, you have to understand, hey, if Tank picks up an ankle injury or if he's a little hobbled here and there for a couple games, it's going to really put this Auburn team in a tough situation because they're not all that deep at running back either. I think right now they only have 2 or 3 scholarship running backs on the team. So you better feel comfortable giving the ball to Tank Bigsby a Derrick Henry-style amount this season if you're Auburn.
And, kind of one more thing on this topic. We'll shift gears after this. I kind of look at the SEC coaches kind of in clusters right now. You've got the cluster of kind of relatively newish SEC West coaches, second-year guys like Kiffin, Pittman, Leach. You had Harsin, the first-year guy in there. In the SEC East, you kind of got the Heupel, Beamer. If you want to count Clark Lee, I don't really care about him one way or another. You kind of got those guys kind of clustered together a little bit. And somebody's going to take food off somebody else's table. Either Brian Harson's the winning coach he proved himself to be at Boise State, and all of a sudden he puts a lot of pressure on one of these second-year guys to maybe put up or shut up pretty quickly there, or the opposite happens where someone like Lane Kiffin, who's kind of been here now for a year and kind of got his program a little bit more established, all of a sudden he prevents a guy like Harson from getting footing. And the SEC East is going to be kind of much the same way. You got guys like Heupel and Beamer trying to get going when Eli Drinkwitz gets a year head start on those guys there at Missouri. And I think in those kind of SEC East, you got a handful of these guys. SEC West, you got a handful of these guys. First and second year coaches, all kind of fighting for the scraps off the table of the Bamas of the SEC West or the Georgias and the Floridas in the SEC East. And there just simply isn't going to be room for everybody. That, to me, is one of the most interesting storylines. If you want to go below who's going to win the league, the next interesting story is who of these relatively new coaches is still employed 2 years from now.
Yeah, I think that's a good storyline. I think for me, who becomes the second best team in the SEC West? Yeah. And Texas A&M is probably the favorite to do so right now. I just have a lot of questions about a team that relied so heavily on that offensive line a year ago to lose 4 starters. Are you going to be able to replace that right away along with, I've made no bones about it. I don't think Kellen Mond is a great quarterback, but he set a bunch of Texas A&M passing records, and Haynes King did not exactly set the world on fire in that spring game there. Can an LSU get things right? Can Ole Miss make a big jump with that offense and Matt Corral coming back? I think the SEC, while yes, it does maybe look to be Georgia, Alabama are neck and shoulders above everyone else, it's a beautiful mess, so to speak, in that middle part of the conference right now.
Yeah, let me just say this about A&M because people do give me grief because I have touted them a little bit. But if you look at their preseason win total right now, at least according to DraftKings at 9.5, they've got a lot more in common with a team like, say, Florida than they do with a team like, say, Georgia, which is kind of viewed more in the category of an Alabama. And I think if there was one simple reason why that's true is that other than at the running back spot, you don't really have that dynamic playmaker at the receiver position right now. And I think any hesitancy, even on my part, someone who would like to, potentially tout A&M to win the SEC West, even on my part, there's a hesitancy to do that because in this league, you're just not going to do it unless you have that dynamic play at wide receiver. For a lot of Georgia fans who are saying, where's our big receiver play going to come from this year? You better believe if Georgia's asking that about itself right now, I would say the Texas A&M is asking that about its program even more. That could be the one thing that holds them back and makes them more of a Florida bowl game type team more so than a college football playoff type bowl team.
Yeah, and the big thing with Texas A&M is, I think Georgia wanted to ride out that, hey, let's rely on our running game, allow our quarterback to make big plays on third down when we need him to, and sort of ride that to as far as they can. Georgia did that. It got them blown out by LSU in the 2019 SEC championship game. And I think after that, Kirby Smart realized he had to change. And the quarterback situation sort of prevented that from really coming into full bloom this past season. But I think you've seen Georgia change the way it's gone about doing things since that LSU game. And I wonder, does that moment happen and come for Texas A&M at some point soon?
It's our Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley here on DawgNation Daily here today. And, of course, Kroger celebrating the graduates in your life. What a great time of the year this is. I love seeing the photos of all the folks who have high school and college graduates. I love the celebration this time of year around all of that. And, of course, Kroger's helping you do that. You can order your party platters from there. You can get your flowers, balloons, that perfect gift card, the greeting card, whatever, to celebrate the graduate in your life. You can get that right there at Kroger. In fact, go to Kroger.com/graduation and find out more about this. That's Kroger.com/graduation, and you can find out more about that. So, kind of a couple of interesting stories that you've written at DawgNation.com that I want to talk about here for a moment. It's really kind of related to the depth that Georgia has in terms of when you look at, certain guys that at least technically speaking are backups in a day and age in which, players rotate so much. I think even the definition of backup has probably changed to a degree. But I don't think anything speaks to the overall talent level of a place like Georgia as much as the fact that, even somewhat casual fans of UGA could rattle off a whole bunch of names of guys who are not technically starters but are big-time fan favorites, expected to be big-time contributors. And really that probably demonstrates the depth of Georgia right now as much as anything else, just the sheer number of very talented backups the program has at the moment.
Yeah, going through it yesterday and sort of checking names off the list, the only two you could really say, I don't know anything about these guys or what they might be able to bring, were Keely Ringo, who we just didn't see at all last year because of the shoulder injury, and then saw him a little bit in the spring game. I liked what I saw, but again, he's still got, I think, not a ways, but a ways to go, so to speak, in terms of being, I think, what everyone thinks he can be. The other one was MJ Sherman, just because we literally haven't seen him at all following the offseason shoulder surgery that he had to repair a torn labrum. But, going through it, Kendall Milton's technically a backup. Jalen Carter is technically a backup. Darnell Washington is technically a backup.
That's right.
You have those guys would be starters at 97% of schools across the country, and the fact that Georgia is able to rotate those guys in and bring them in off the bench, I think, is a huge benefit. The third piece that'll go in companion with this is who are the most indispensable players, the ones that Georgia can't afford to lose. And unfortunately, I think they've already lost one of the three big ones in George Pickens, but other than Pickens, I think it's obviously JT Daniels just because of quarterback. You saw a year ago when you do lose your theoretical starting quarterback, it just really unwinds everything else you have. And then Jordan Davis because he is a real one-of-one.
That's right.
But other than that, I think they've got quality depth across this roster at just about every position.
Yeah, I do think one of the things that Smart does well is, and sometimes this is even to the detriment of fans who want to see players get bigger stats, but Kirby has found a way over the course of his time to get a lot of players involved. And we're in a day and age in which morale really matters. We're going to talk more about some of the horror stories coming out of the transfer portal a little bit before we're done on today's program. But whatever you can do to kind of give players a chance to be happy, I think serves your program well over the long haul. And so the fact that while, Darnell Washington, air quotes here, is a backup for Georgia, even in that role, he's still going to play a lot. Jalen Carter, as a freshman defensive lineman, Georgia was finding all kinds of ways to get him involved. Third downs, they threw to him at one point in time this year. One of the cool things about Georgia is that they find a way to get you involved. They're not looking to keep a lot of guys on the bench. They're not looking to redshirt a bunch of guys. They're looking to just find ways to get as many players in the field as they can. I think it helps season the depth that you do have, but I think it also works to potentially keep players happy as well.
Right, and because of that, we know a little bit more about Nolan Smith. We know a little bit more about Adam Anderson, so to speak, because we have seen them play in limited roles when they were younger, and now as they are more physically ready, more mentally capable heading into their veteran seasons here at Georgia, you feel like you have a better idea of what you're going to get out of them. So it does work. The only time this sort of, I guess, strategy maybe backfires a little bit would be in a situation of Jermaine Johnson where you have a really good and talented player, but he says, I want more. I want to have a true starring role. And Georgia just isn't going to be that place, at least for a guy like Jermaine Johnson, because again, they want to rotate guys. They don't want to wear you down. They want to have you fresh and ready to go at the end of the season and then obviously going into the NFL. And so because of that, you might not get the snaps that you want to see, as was the case with Jermaine Johnson. But even I think you look at guys like, say, DeAndre Swift, who easily could have dictated and carried the ball more often, but Georgia chose to be selective in how they used him and rotated backs in behind him. And I think ultimately in the long run, that ended up benefiting a guy like DeAndre Swift. So it's sort of a best of both worlds, as long as you don't get too many of those guys who just say, I want to be true stars.
Along those same lines, you heard about the freshmen at DawgNation this week, and this is a point that I agree with. I've talked about this before myself over the years, that as Georgia's roster gets better and deeper and the recruiting pipeline continues to flow, in each individual year, the expectation ought to be that freshmen contribute less in future years than previous years. You go back to 2017 when this roster was nowhere as deep as it is now. You had to have Andrew Thomas start for you in 2017. You had to have big contributions from other freshmen there as well, just to be as deep as you wanted to be, as good as you thought you could be. As you get towards 2021, the hope is among Georgia fans that you need freshmen less. However, I've kind of thought about this a lot since your story first appeared at DawgNation.com, and here's the conclusion that I've kind of drawn, almost an addendum to my previous thoughts on this, that while maybe overall the median freshman performer for Georgia in any given recruiting class might contribute less, just given the fact the roster is deeper than it's been before, boy, I'm not quite so sure your best freshman shouldn't be playing and contributing a little bit more. When you think about what a Derek Stingley has been for LSU in 2019, what a Patrick Surtain once was for Alabama. Alabama's had a few of these, that your very best freshman may be better, but overall your median freshman, on a deep roster, he may be contributing a little less.
Right, and so one of the guys that I'd really focus on is, say, Amarius Mims. Yeah. Similar to Stingley, similar to Surtain. Those were top 10 overall prospects. And Mims, I believe, number 7 overall player, top player in Georgia's signing class. Obviously, the history is not great when it comes to freshman tackles playing right away at an SEC level, but he is someone who I think over the course of the season you could see him develop and maybe get onto the field and start maybe eventually win that left tackle job, given how much uncertainty there is there. So, to the larger point, when narrowing it down, I think there's right now maybe 4 guys that we can expect to see. I don't even know how consistently, but expect to see make plays this season. I would say maybe a Nyland Green, depending on how cornerback shakes out. And if Georgia goes out and brings in a certain cornerback that once played at Clemson, I think that goes out and disappears. Or at least
by the way, those rumors have not gone anywhere.
If anything, this might be a new BA speaking it into existence.
Those rumors have not
Mr. Darian Kendrick
dissipated. Not one bit. It doesn't.
I think Brock Bowers is another guy just because he's sort of a one of one on this Georgia team right now, and that Georgia doesn't have another guy like him, and he can bring something a little different to this offense. I mean, Adonai Mitchell, I don't think you can ignore what he did in the spring game, even though obviously it is a spring game, but he showed a little bit of flashes there, and given no George Pickens, he might be your starting X at some point during the season. And then Mims isn't going to be a day one starter for Georgia, but I do think you could certainly see him move into that role over the course of the season. But really, and granted, it's a smaller class, and that's going to be, I think, something you expect from Georgia going forward now, just because you're going to see them go out and try and grab 2 or 3 transfers every cycle. So it is by having a smaller class and a weirder year, I do think you're going to see a smaller number of true stud freshmen playing for this Georgia team.
Very quickly, I want to follow up on something we talked about last week. We were talking about how there'd been very little said about the new football facility for Georgia, and it almost got to be a little bit weird that they were saying so little about it. Since you and I spoke, they have talked a lot about more about this. There have been more videos revealed, and it certainly seems like that a lot of this was kind of, now maybe they had a construction delay, who knows, a lot of commercial projects do, but it certainly seems like a lot of the video chatter around this as of late has been timed to kind of set the stage for visits coming in June. And I just want to at least follow up on that to say that what we had not heard very much of by last Tuesday, we have certainly heard a lot more about since then.
I don't want to say Georgia and Kirby Smart and the staff listened to the show, but boy, it's hard not to connect the dots here and say, hey, hold on. If Brandon Adams is starting to ask questions about where things are and what we're hearing about this, maybe give him a little taste, a little behind-the-scenes magic. Let them show other people reacting to this brand new $80 million facility, but don't give away the whole story yet, Jed. Give them a couple of nice little teaser trailers, and then we'll open it up, have a soft opening for these recruits, and then eventually we'll open it up for the whole world to see and let everyone know that this new facility that Georgia has is absolutely going to be a weapon in terms of attracting top talent, in terms of making players want to come and play at Georgia, because it is I expect to be one of the best facilities in the country.
And obviously everybody's looking for that reason to pick up the phone right now, get the recruit on the other side of the phone or text message or DM, whatever it is these days, to have a legitimate reason to say, hey, we think you're going to love what you're going to see here because you've never seen this before. For a lot of these guys, they haven't seen anywhere before. They haven't been able to take visits, but it is just an easy way to get that conversation started, and we're obviously all really excited about what's going to happen here around the month of June, and this is just kind of an easy way to kind of build momentum for that, I would say.
Right, in a month where I think visits are going to be more telling and more important than they ever have been at any point in the recruiting cycle, just because it's going to, I think, give a good idea of where guys are leaning in terms of where they want to go, where they actually end up going. I think having that in your back pocket as a tool to, maybe sway a prospect or two to say, hey, I know you're expecting to visit Alabama this week or Clemson this week, but we've got this brand new facility. We'd love you to come down and see it, show it off, show you all that Georgia has to offer. And, that's something very nice to have in your back pocket as you go out and try and compete with Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, LSU, and sign some of the best prospects in the country.
Connor, great stuff. Thanks for being here as part of a Kroger Fresh Take here today.
Yep, as always, was a pleasure, BA.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Great stuff there from Connor Riley. Appreciate all of you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And by the way, speaking of more great stuff, I am really proud of what my friends at secondchance.law are doing right now. The law is just confusing, right? And sometimes I almost wonder if it's confusing on purpose. But either way, there is a new program that's out there that you need to make sure that you understand, because for so many of you, let's face it, we kind of get in trouble every now and then, right? We make a decision we wish we could have done different. Goodness knows in my life, I've got a lot of things I'd like to have back. And when it comes to the law right now and your criminal history, there's a way to kind of get a second chance on some of this kind of stuff, which hints at the name, secondchance.law. You can actually get, previous convictions kind of restricted off your record, which gives you a better chance at a better job. In some cases, gives you a better opportunity for where you might be able to live. And a way to navigate the confusing legal process and all of this, if you go to secondchance.law, that's the website, secondchance.law. If you go to the website, you can answer kind of a free online quiz, and you can determine your eligibility for this program. And the good news is, if you're not eligible, well, secondchance.law can help give you some guidance about how you might be able to become eligible. I love Second Chance Law because of the work they do. I believe in second chances, but also because one of the partners is a longtime listener to DawgNation Daily, a former Redcoat band member. We love the Redcoats around here, and a two-time UGA graduate there as well, double dog, as we like to call them. So please check out Second Chance Law today, and let a good guy, good people from the University of Georgia help you with a, tough situation that you might be able to go through there. All right, SEC through time here. We talked about this yesterday. We actually talked about this a few days. And pretty much the news ended up being exactly what we thought it would be, even though there was kind of a weird detour there for a while. TJ Finley has arrived at Auburn. Do I think that Finley will beat out Bo Nix for the job this year, assuming the SEC opens the door for Finley to be immediately eligible? I guess I kind of don't, but it certainly could happen. I did think it was kind of telling that Bo Nix kind of gave you the, hey, welcome to the family type, Instagram message yesterday. Obviously, that's the expectation here around, stuff kind of like this. And so clearly there's a competition that's about to go on between Finley and Nix. And the fact that Finley started 5 games a year ago for LSU, it's a valuable asset for Auburn, whether he beats out, Nix as the starter right now or not. And don't forget this. Finley was a freshman last year. Last year did not count against your eligibility. If Auburn likes what they have in TJ Finley, he can be quarterback at Auburn for a long time to come. So I think this is decently big news. At the very least, this is more quarterback depth for Auburn right now than they've had before. And the potential exists here that Finley ends up being a pretty good quarterback, for Auburn eventually, working with Mike Bobo, the Brian Harsin system. So kind of interesting news coming out of the Auburn program. We're seeing a lot more of these intra-conference transfers right now. Finley, the latest, he lands there on the Plains. I thought that Alex Scarborough had a very good story at ESPN.com, and there's no doubt that this is the biggest story in all of college football to me right now, and I thought Scarborough's angle on all this was very interesting. And on this show, we have predicted in no uncertain terms that this was going to happen, that the transfer portal, the way that it currently is being used, kind of a free-for-all, do whatever you want, opens the door for unbelievable tampering. In other words, reaching out to someone else on a roster who's not in the transfer portal to see if you can convince him to go in the transfer portal. Now, as much as I like the Scarborough piece at ESPN.com, I guess one of the nits I would pick with this is this is kind of covered in the Scarborough piece as, this is like akin to cheating. And, by the letter of the law, it kind of is. But my issue with this is not the fact that it's cheating, because the fact of the matter is, you look at some of the college basketball stuff, things like that. Obviously, this is far from the first accusation of cheating that's happened around college sports. The issue more for me is the destabilizing effect this has on programs. That when you can't even trust that your own players are your players, that you've got some other coach, some other program trying to swoop in and steal a guy that has not said he's looking to transfer. They're trying to coerce him into transferring, saying heaven knows what to get him to do so. This is not about the cheating for me. It's about the destabilizing effect it's going to have on college football. And you ought to pay attention to this. There are people who are going to try to use this as leverage to pull players away from rosters, and it has the potential of hurting the entire sport. The other thing that I would take slight issue with Scarborough on, even though I thought his piece overall was excellent, is he kind of frames some of this kind of in the vein of player empowerment. He kind of compares the way that NBA super teams form with players also recruiting each other to come play together on these various teams. This whole notion that the players are the ones who are in charge and all of this, I guess I'll quote briefly from Bane, the Batman movie. Does it feel like you're in charge? Does that feel like what's going on here? Because to me, the unspoken context in all of this, the subtext, I guess if you will, of all of this is the transfer portal now is, I think, becoming a problem for the players themselves. Because when you listen to the coaches who were quoted in the story from Alex Scarborough and everything along those lines, the kind of unspoken subtext to all this is that coaches are using the transfer portal to replace players on their own roster, to upgrade the talent they have on their own roster. So what you have now is, and it's not really at the Georgia level because we're talking about a different kind of level of talent all the way around, but you have a lot of players and a lot of rosters who are left to wonder, is my spot secure? Or is my coach looking around to see if he can find somebody a little older, a little better, a little more experienced, a little whatever else? That's the unspoken context and subtext around all of this right now. I think we're getting to the point that if you want to be for the players, if you want to be pro player, I think you've got to be anti-transfer portal, at least in terms of the way that it's currently being used around the sport and the way that trend is continuing to move. As I said before, you don't have to take my word for this. You should do your own research. The Alex Scarborough story is free to read. It's at ESPN.com. It's worth your time. Read that and tell me yourself. Do you think this, as described by him and the coaches and figures around the sport who spoke to Alex on the record for ESPN.com, is that scenario good for the sport? Boy, I'm not quite so sure about that. Very quickly, I'm also say this SEC baseball tournament beginning. You got game 1 going on right now. Florida and Kentucky, they are playing there in Hoover. Georgia later on tonight against LSU. Scott Strickland's treating this as a need to win to get in the NCAA tournament type game, and some people say they may need more than one win. I did see where D1 Baseball, which is one of like the big websites that covers college baseball, they do have Georgia in their most recent field. It's kind of like their own baseball version of bracketology, a 3 seed in the Charlotte region there. So Strickland is ignoring that for the moment and treating the game tonight against LSU as a game they have to win. Freshmen on the mound for the Dogs. We will see how that goes and have more coverage for you there at DawgNation.com as well. We'll make that your SEC through, and we will wrap up today with really good stuff. Gator Hater Roll Call. We love our audience hating on the Gators. It's always a fun thing to be able to do. In fact, we award you for doing so. It's our golden shoe that we give out each and every day. Of course, an homage to Marco Wilson and the throne shoe for the Florida Gators back this fall. Kind of a funny winner here today who sends us a picture of, it's a trash truck on the highway, and it's that UGA guy. It's at DawgNation 1994 on Twitter, who said, my wife said that she'd never seen a dump truck on the interstate, and that UGA guy says, I looked her straight in the eyes and said, that's not a dump truck, that's a Gator's mode of transportation. I like the idea of that. DawgNation 94 on Twitter says, I thought I would appreciate that. You better believe I do. He gives you the Gator Hater hashtags. Good stuff. You are our golden shoe winner for today. And speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, how about a Gator Hater countdown? 158 days. We'll see you tomorrow at DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cooldown. Appreciate you being here for our comments here. We're going to be kind of quick on all of this today. I do have to apologize for that. Eventually, we'll try to get back to some longer comments. We just have so much stuff going on, it seems, these days. But nonetheless, R.S. Andrews, the one you trust for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. They will take good care of you. It's like 100 degrees this week. AC's working overdrive. Are you sure? I mean, are you 100% sure yours is ready to go for the summer that's on its way? Get the peace of mind you need. Tune it back up to factory fresh specs with R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. All right, I will do I did YouTube first yesterday. Let me do Facebook first today. We'll get a few comments there, and we'll kind of roll on with all of this. Phil Rogers says, look at who we could start at wide receiver: Dominic Blaylock, Kyrus Jackson, Demetrius Robertson, maybe even James Cook. I would certainly expect him to throw the ball to Cook a lot. Yeah, the potential playmakers there for Georgia are pretty legion. Better even than some teams who think of themselves pretty good football teams. They have less potential options at playmaker, obviously, than what Georgia brings to the table right now, for sure. Blake Wilson, good to have you back in the comments section. Blake, I'm glad to have you here live today. Appreciate that. John William Adams says, does Kendrick need to declare by May 30th to be eligible for the season? I don't believe that's the case. I don't know the rules. Connor, there's no May 30th deadline for Darian Kendrick, is there? I honestly don't know. I'm not a stickler for rules.
No, the deadline when it comes to the transfer portal is you must let your current school know by June 30th / July 1st.
And Kendrick's already done that ways away ago. Yeah. So that's the portal. That's the deadline for entering the portal. And that's going to be an important day, not just for Georgia, I said before. For teams that have these huge needs, Auburn at wide receiver, whatever else. You're going to see there are a lot of names who are not in the portal yet. They're going to dominate the conversation, June, July, things like that. We're going to have very big names entering into the portal that haven't even gone in yet. So it's going to be a huge story. But the Kendrick thing is not one of those situations where he has to be in there by May 30th. Randy Hall says, I need a portal crystal ball on my desk. That would be kind of cool. I don't really know what our special effects budget around here is. But if we did have the crystal ball thing, I kind of like rub it and like Darian Kendrick or, certain tight end, if their face just kind of appeared in the portal. I wonder what kind of special effects we could pull off here. Phil Rogers says, when does the summer 7-on-7 start at UGA? So obviously a lot of those kind of drill works, things like that, kind of ongoing. That's some of what I believe they've been doing out in California there as well. A lot of that, of course, independent, being done away from those coaches because the coaches are limited in that contact. Brandon Rowland says, how far does the Gators offense deflate this year? I think it has the potential of deflating pretty significantly. I look at the receiver situation for Florida. I don't know that I see a great receiver there. I mean, honestly, at times last year, flashes, I thought Justin Shorter looked okay. And guess what? Jacob Copeland's still there, I guess. I think there is some expectation that DeMarcus Bowman's a better running back than Florida has had before. So maybe that's a little bit different. Because that's one of the things that, Dan Mullen at Mississippi State actually ran the ball fairly well. They haven't run the ball at all at Florida. And, sometimes Mullen defiantly hasn't even called running plays. Obviously, the Florida game against Georgia in 2019 is an example of that. But, we haven't really seen, Kirby Smart's talked about that before, that kind of that downhill runner that Mississippi State usually had under Dan Mullen. That Florida really hasn't found that running game yet. So maybe Bowman is the offensive playmaker they lean on this year more so. Jerry Popham, and I meant to mention this during the regular show, and I forgot to. Sometimes it drives me crazy, the stuff I forget. But Georgia does bring in a player from Gonzaga, transfer over. Jerry Popham mentioning the basketball team in the comment section. I mean, if you're good enough to be on the Gonzaga roster, I guess you're pretty good. So my assumption is this is probably pretty good for Georgia. So Georgia does add another transfer there, and I meant to mention that in the regular show and just forgot to. One of these days, I guess I'll remember to get it all in. Matt Rukavina wonders if Florida will be as loud after this 8-4 year as they were after last year's 4-loss season. That's a good question. Let me get a couple more here, and then we'll go to YouTube. Randy Hall says Bowman's listed as the number 3 running back at Florida. I don't know if that, you may be right. That may be where he's listed, but I can't imagine they're going to have too many backs better than him. I guess maybe Damian Pierce still there, the former Bainbridge product, and I guess Lorenzo Lingard may still be there as well, although we saw Lingard last year, and I don't know about that too much. Thomas Tyson, the subject of Darian Kendrick. Yeah, listen, I won't pretend to have any new information there, but I have certainly noticed the way in which the internet continues to buzz about this. And listen, I've been very consistent about this. When the off-field issue first emerged for Kendrick, I'm not scandalized by that. People, have issues from time to time. And around here, we are very consistent. We do not drop the hammer on anybody. We are not looking to kick anybody out of college football unless it's just, no other choice. We condemn very slowly around here. We are very slow to condemn. That's for players that end up playing at Georgia. That's for players that go to other places. We just don't do a lot of condemnation around here. So the Kendrick thing was never something I was scared off by, whatever it was that, he's alleged to have done. And, it sounds like, maybe some cooler heads are prevailing around that when it comes to the legal situation. We'll have to see. Like I said, it's not my news to necessarily report right now, but you better believe I'm paying attention. All right, let's see what else. By the way, good to see Dennis Wilson back in the comment section and stirring people up again. Foster Moss asked about Lane Kiffin. So this is one of those, to me, and I do love the SEC stuff back and forth. I do really enjoy that. But I will tell you that Lane Kiffin is just not my guy. Now, when he was Alabama offensive coordinator, as a play caller, I really liked him. But as a head coach, I just have a lot of skepticism about Kiffin. I said this on yesterday's show, too, related to the Randy Clements firing, and now you have to go to Gardner-Webb to find a new offensive line coach, and he's being billed as a former Alabama assistant. He was a graduate assistant at Alabama. This is not somebody that was like Nick Saban's right-hand man. All of this feels like an unforced error to me. And, the over-under number for Ole Miss this year is no joke. That's 7.5 in the SEC West. You have to win 8 to exceed that expectation. That's a lot of belief in an Ole Miss team that plays in a tough division that does have a really good quarterback, I would think, in Matt Corral. And, You would think the Lane Kiffin system is set up really well for him. And really, they got a good running back too, Jerry Neely. So they got, good, talented players. I'm not quite so sure about wide receiver anymore, just given all the guys they've lost in recent years. My magazines will be on newsstands here pretty soon, so I'll spend the summer, I guess, reading about Ole Miss's wide receivers, which I'm sure sounds like a party. But nonetheless, I would go under 7.5 on Ole Miss. And, your thought about, hey, they almost pulled the upset last year. Do they come and do that again finally get the job done this year? Foster, I just don't believe in Kiffin in that way. And yes, they did play closely a year ago. I don't know that I ever really thought Alabama was going to lose that game, although Ole Miss moved the football as much as they wanted to. I won't deny that. But that's just kind of what Kiffin seems to do. He seems to create fireworks that are not really that closely connected to actual wins. So I don't know. Rashad Davis asked about another big name in the transfer portal. I mean, this is where I'm going to be a liar and a hypocrite, because I've told y'all before that I have completely given up on the idea of a Rick Gilbert. I've waved the white flag. The honest truth is, I don't know. I guess the longer it goes without hearing anything official, the more you kind of wonder if there's still some little candle in the window. So I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, I think Gilbert's a big-time player, and I'd like it for sure. So my official position is no, that's not going to happen. But privately, I realize we're not in a private conversation right now. We're in a public forum. But, privately, do I kind of at least keep my ear to the ground to see what you hear on the Gilbert thing? Yeah, I kind of do. Good to see Bob Zamblin in our YouTube comment section here today. He says the Dogs' offensive line performance will be critical to Daniel's success and offense overall, especially against Clemson game 1. I think Bob's 100% right about that. That, what you do with that offensive line, especially against that very, very tough Clemson pass rush, protecting JT Daniel in that game is going to be, just a monumental story. James Wade also asking for Rick Gilbert there as well. Listen, and James an LSU guy, I think he probably thinks that Gilbert's staying there in Baton Rouge, and he very well might. Just all I'm saying is this: don't some of y'all are like Connor. Sometimes you hear things I'm not saying. Don't hear what I'm not saying. All I'm saying is the longer we go without hearing anything official, some sort of official proclamation, the more I at least keep the eye towards the notion that, hey, who knows what might happen? Who can say in these modern times in which we live? All of a sudden now we're going deep. Mike D says, what about Jay Nazel? You might as well bring him over too. Listen, I didn't want to burn a bridge in that recruitment there either. Now, it sounds like Hazelwood's one of Oklahoma's top guys this year. So it sounds like they're pretty excited about using him coming off an injury. But, someday in the future, Jaden wants to come home. I'll be there to welcome him for sure. Frank Patterson says there are only 3 other backs I'd rather have than Tank. So, I like Tank Bigsby as well, and I kind of already have. Frank also says people are sleeping on Dominic Blaylock, and they very well might be. But it's not – if anybody's so-called sleeping on Blaylock, it's not because they are truly disregarding him as a talent. I do think – people ask in the comment section all the time, how healthy is he? And everything I've heard about Dominic is that he's on his way to a full and healthy recovery. But admittedly, you do hear a little less about that than you have about Marcus Rosemy-Jackson. That doesn't mean that he's farther along or less far along or anything like that. But part of the reason why someone might be quote-unquote sleeping on Blaylock is we just don't hear as much about Dom's situation right now. It's his right to keep his medical situation, private, or just one of those things. There's no platform for him to talk about how healthy he is. But, some of this is when it comes to a guy like Dom, some Georgia fans just maybe be left to wonder just how healthy is he going to be, knowing that you want to be as careful with the guy that's had a couple of those injuries as you can. Let's see what else. Miriam Martin Corbin, it's good to see her, by the way, in the comment section, says it's called being hopefully optimistic, BA. I like it. Yeah, we're having a little hopeful optimism today, Miriam, for sure. Good to see you, by the way, too. Randy Hall says June's going to be a fun month. Bring on the new toys. Recorded chortles there as well. Yeah, Randy kind of keeps that going. And I do think that's one of those things we're going to add here at some point in time. Some folks asking about what Tennessee fans enjoy right now. Yeah, I would say that, Tennessee fans, at least on the basis of the message board chatter that I pay attention to, and I do try to pay attention to it, they seem like a pretty dejected fan base at the moment. Listen, Georgia fans probably been there before. I mean, let's not, kid ourselves to say that it hasn't happened for Georgia fans before. But, boy, it really seems like there's a lot of just disappointment amongst Tennessee fans. I don't know they're buying into Josh Heupel too much. We had Jason Swain, former Tennessee wide receiver. We've had him on SEC Country Live a couple of times. I think Jason's a good voice around that Knoxville program. And, I mean, he's not sugarcoating things. There's a big wait-and-see attitude around Tennessee right now to see what happens in that quarterback spot, how you fill out the rest of these roster spots. Tennessee seems like they got about 25 openings for players right now. So maybe y'all are seeing something that I'm not seeing, but there's not a lot of delusional optimism around Tennessee right now, at least that I'm noticing. Those Vols fans are pretty dejected. Dallas Schwartz checking in the comment section today. Pretty funny line from him. Good to see Dallas checking in here today. Connor Graham says we doing post-game at the bookstore this year. I hope to be, Connor. I'm assuming we will be for sure. Davis Painter also asking about Ronald Acuna's potential National League MVP. Boy, he's got to be in the conversation right now. I would say that's certainly probably for sure. I would say that's certainly in the mix for that. Let's get one or two more. By the way, Martin Arendado also mentioning Austin Riley. Yeah, Riley to me is the real revelation for not to say that what Acuna's done hasn't been amazing, but the fact that Riley right now just looks like a much improved player. A guy that still hasn't really quite had what you would think of as like a full major league season yet, right? You're talking about pandemic shortened season a year ago. Kind of some up and down play as a true first year rookie. Before that in 2019, this is his first chance to get one of those like 500 bat full seasons. And he's had multiple home run games twice in the last 3 games, playing, I would say, a pretty good brand of third base there as well. That's a pretty big deal for Atlanta at the moment to go along with what is truly MVP level play from Acuna. To think that right now, Riley's swinging a good bat there as well. Potentially a guy that needs to maybe move up in the order a little bit. I think I might consider moving Ozuna down and moving Riley to the third spot and go, Acuna, Freddie, Riley, 1, 2, 3. Richard Dees. Boy, it was so good to see Richard at our event this past Friday. We had such a good time. Richard and I shared a beverage during the game itself, and he says he's looking forward to seeing some of those post-June 4 commitments. I am there as well. But, Richard, thank you for making DawgNation Days of Summer so much fun for me. It was really, really good to see you there on Friday. Really appreciate that. Also, Green Soldier was with us there, too, and he's in the comment section today. P. Rich says Acuna's got to do it in the playoffs, and obviously there's going to be some pressure on the Braves to get to the postseason and continue to advance there. All right, let me get one or two more, then we got to go for today. A lot of folks checking in. Good to see all that. Keith Folds, always good here as well. So good comments rolling in. We're going to get ready to roll off the air for ourselves here today. I do want to remind you of this, though. Speaking of the Braves, they get back in action again tonight. Hawks are going to get going later on this week there as well. Game 2 coming up from Madison Square Garden. Boy, that's going to be a ton of fun. And there's great coverage of all of this at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. A whole bunch more on that. Also, the ways in which kind of, summer around the Atlanta area is kind of getting back to normal. Really good camp stuff for kids and all kinds of fun stuff around all of that. So make sure you check that out. Plus, Arthur Smith's got a press conference coming up later on today, and more reaction to what Julio Jones said on FS1. I still don't know if Julio knew he was on TV or not. It's an FCC violation to put someone on air and not tell them they're on air, but we'll let the folks over at FS1 figure that out for themselves. But the Julio drama in Atlanta with the Falcons, Hawks looking to stay hot up there in New York and get a Game 2 win, bring it back home with them. Obviously, the Brave stuff there as well. SEC baseball tournament. So much stuff going on right now, and a lot of it you can just be better informed about all of it. Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at AJC.com. Y'all make sure you check that out. Also, big thanks to R.S. Andrews for making R.S. Andrews cooldown possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. R.S. Andrews will show up. They'll do the work on time. for the price that was promised. They'll take really good care of you. They'll get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. So make sure you find them today online at rsandrews.com. You have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Look forward to talking to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.